they're fixing the projector.
So I'm supposed to introduce you for a bit. So
okay.
I'll just take a minute to talk. He is the Vice Chancellor of Columbia University. He has been acting mechanical engineering and he has a PhD in computer science and engineering university. He was dean of the College of Engineering and the now chair in engineering at the University of Arkansas. Before that, he spent 18 years at Tech. We decided to do a opening keynote session around this whole area of benchmarking and accreditation. And as part of this, we invited representatives from both the pilots or the referred to BA as well as the MAX. So over to you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I want to thank Prabhat for asking me to host this session. My job here is to try to introduce some key topics here. Most of the hard work or hard lifting is going to be done by the panelists. And we have just added one more panelist into our session. I think Prabhat wants a few minutes to talk about the results from the EDU survey that was recently done. And if you look at your programs, you will find that he does mention the results of the survey. So what I'm going to do is ask him to first come and talk about the survey, and then we will take the rest of the topic.
So this survey is actually in the EDU magazine, the latest issue. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly go through this because you can actually read it in the magazine. But I just thought that some of this data might be useful in the context of the discussion to follow. We had a two-part survey. So the first part of the survey was just a set of questions, which was what are your views on the existing benchmarking initiatives? Based on what you said in the first part, we designed a second survey, which we sent out. So the first part of the first survey was filled by some 500 people across the board, and some of you may have filled that. And based on that, we sent out a second survey, which turned out to be purely focused on rankings. So because people said in the first survey that rankings was the best, or they thought was the most important indicator today in India for quality. So in terms of, I'll skip some of these. I think in the first big question, the big takeaway was that people felt that the performance metric should be by discipline. This is the pointer. 61% of the people felt that performance metrics should vary according to the different disciplines. So I think that was one big takeaway. There was also some people who felt that it should be by the source of funding. Benchmarking, everybody thought was important. Only 2/3 felt that they were actually practicing benchmarking today in their institutions. Rankings was the overwhelming popular measure for benchmarking. So 77% of people who took part in the survey felt that it was only rankings that we were using today to do benchmarking. That's quite incredible. Between private and public, there was not much difference. Accreditation, everybody felt was very important amongst public, private, and overall. I would say that roughly 70 to 80% of people felt it was important or very important. So that was something that came out very clearly. Obviously, the professional streams felt that accreditation was most important. The issue was, which Pradul brought out, was lack of an autonomous objective institution in India, and for opting for international accreditation, people felt credibility, the international and global recognition in terms of partnership groups and faculty was one reason to seek international accreditation. And is there a need for an independent body? 87% said yes. Rankings were seen as contentious, and the question we asked was, do you think it's a fair picture? So while everybody is depending on rankings, only 10% said yes. I guess those are the people who are in the top. 34% said no, and half of the people are undecided whether that is a fair picture. Which rankings do you trust? THE, Times Higher Education, came out on top. QS was number 2. 31% those said no rankings they trust. Within India, the India Today rankings came out at 37%, which is quite significant. The next biggest was Outlook, though I should point out that 37% also said that they did not think any of them were used. Now within the rankings, this is the second part of the survey. So once you all said that rankings is important, we said, okay, what within rankings is important? We came up with this post ranking where the most popular parameter is faculty and so on. I won't go through all this. I will skip the rest of this and get into some. So what we did was we took the 10 parameters for ranking, and within these we gave you options to choose. So if you had to measure faculty quality, what is the most important thing in faculty quality that you look at? So within faculty, it turns out that proportion of full-time faculty was the biggest determinant, then full-time faculty with PhDs, and so on. So infrastructure was the next big thing. In infrastructure, labs was number 1, libraries was number 2, IT infrastructure was number 3. So again, I won't take you through each of these, but they are all there in the current issue of EDU, which you all have. In student profile, for example, average marks for cutoff, not surprisingly, was seen as the most important determinant of quality. In research, international publications and citations, not papers published per faculty member, was seen as the highest, and so on. For example, in curriculum and pedagogical, developing new courses that are relevant to industry and research came out to, and relevant and latest research then came out as a determinant. So the details are in there. I will stop here. Ashok to just give you a quick overview. Over to you.
I thought I will just take a couple of minutes and put some things down on paper that I think most of us can agree on. If we just look at any discussion on excellence, we have to start with what are the key factors, what is the ecosystem that makes a higher education system effective. And I sort of think effective, being effective, and excellent are sort of synonymous, at least in my vocabulary. And the reason I say that is because effective is a more general term that says whether you are fulfilling your mission. And one of the things that we heard in the previous presentation by the UGC chairman was that the mission of all the schools need not be identical. So I think even when we approach accreditation, I think accreditation should be based on how well you fulfill your mission. And the reason for a differing mission is, for example, the preparation of incoming students and a curriculum designed with the student in mind. Think of offering the same curriculum that you offer to the top 0.5% of the student population in the IITs and try to enforce the same to students who are not as well prepared as those IIT students. So, but if you recognize the mission to be different, then you should be evaluated against your mission as opposed to some absolute standard. A variety of universities and colleges must be available that cater to students with different levels of preparation and capabilities. And then we must have a flexible system that allows students to move up the ladder progressively. So even from an institution that is less well known and taking students mostly from first generation college board, you can pick the brightest students and move them progressively to the students of, to the better universities. Campus life is important. Investment in faculty recruitment and development and retention. I don't think that should come as a surprise to any of you. Availability of endowment funds, philanthropic support, and low-interest government-backed loans to help those who cannot afford the tuition. Research funding provided by the central and state governments that makes research an integral part of the educational pedagogy. Now, the reason I have put all these points is that if you're going some context in mind. The context in this case is what is it that we do to make our education system more effective. And that is why I felt that these points need to be put in front of us while we're talking about excellence and benchmarking and accreditation. And I'm looking directly at Dr. Palwan when I say accreditation, because he has some novel ideas on the outcomes-based education that are quite in accord with some of the things I've said about the mission. So we will hear from him later on. Now, when it comes to ranking, why are they important? I think Pramod talked about why they are ranking, why they're important. But I think if you ask an average academic, they do not like the idea of rankings. But the fact is that good rankings do attract good students, good faculty, good employment opportunities for the students, good financial support to do things the academics want, promotes high morale among faculty and students, and motivates them to perform to their potential. So I know when I was growing up and my mother wanted me to drink milk, I did not enjoy that prospect of drinking milk every night. But she made me do it, it was for my good. And rankings similarly, even though the academics do not enjoy it and we can argue whether they should be there or whether they are subjective, the fact is they're there and there are plenty of stakeholders that actually look at it. So if you are an academic, you may, we don't always get to do things we enjoy doing. So some things we have to do because they are necessary. This is the US factor, and I just voted actually in this particular ranking survey for the next year. And you can see this is a beauty contest. Basically, 40% of the weight is given to academics who pick out the best universities. And I was just thinking that I was voting through the various universities in China, Australia, and everywhere else, that if the ranking of these institutions is dependent on how much I know about those universities, I do worry about the subjectiveness of the whole exercise. But that again is the fact of life. Okay? Then the academic reputation is built on research, and therefore research is important. Employer reputation may not be built strictly on research, but I think if you talk about hiring of PhD students or PhD graduates, it is built on research. Faculty-student ratio depends, the research productivity depends quite a bit on that. Citations per faculty, the research index, international faculty ratio, again, people are attracted by research. International student ratio, people are again attracted by research. So research. That is the mantra for getting highly ranked. And I have, as Pramod said, worked at Georgia Tech, where they very systematically use benchmarking to improve their ranking. And in fact, I will be at a session on Sunday for those of you who are interested. We can talk a little bit deeper into what benchmarking is about. So with these opening comments, what I want to do is to move on to the panel. And their impressive CVs are all online and they have been provided to you. What I would like to do instead is to call upon the panelists, and they have the choice to speak from right where they are, or if they want to come and address the audience from the podium, I think they're welcome to do that. So this is your own choice. The first panelist is Mr. Pavan Agarwal, advisor to the higher education, for higher education in the Planning Commission of India. And he's certainly no stranger to this audience. His name has already come up a few times. The next one is Dinesh Paliwal, whose name has also come up a few times. He's the member secretary of the NBA. Mr. Ranganath, I think your name came up a few times in the discussion that the UGC chairman had. And he was the former director of NAC. And then I have Dr. Premra, who has been engaged in benchmarking and monitoring several parameters. So each of the panelists, if you can speak for about 5 minutes or so to present a few ideas, and then we can open it up for general questions and comments for the remainder of the period. I think it's a little bit behind, but I'm sure Pramod will give us 1 hour that we've been allocated. Okay? So let me call upon Mr. Pavan, if you want to come forward.
It's visible, you know.
Yeah, I can do that.
Very good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Let me first congratulate Prabhat and his team for organizing this retreat. Particularly, the format is very interesting. And as we all know that the Indian system of higher education is large, very diverse, and very complex. And in this kind of ecosystem, you require very deep thinking to address issues that confront our higher education. And this kind of format allows that kind of deep thinking where university leaders from across the country to look at some of the aspects very closely, come up with leverage points where action will be taken. It is particularly important because the process of policy making in higher education is committee driven, and in almost all these committees, you all are represented. You decide what is to be done, and though as chair of UGC, he was speaking here, but he's also dictated by a commission which has members, and I know for sure that how much difficulty he had in persuading his colleagues to impress a good idea. So I think it is important for all of us sitting in this room to engage ourselves in deep thinking about issues in higher education. And in that context, I'll step 2 steps backwards and not come directly to issues of accreditation benchmarking, but briefly mention about 2-3 significant changes that we are seeing in the world of higher education. One is about higher education's outpricing itself. At least in the US and many countries in Europe, and also a large part of higher education in India is outpricing itself. Professor Ved Prakash, I think, number of times referred to the allocations that the government is able to make for higher education. And let me tell you that we spent around 1.4% of our GDP public funds on higher education. And if we include private household funding, it will be around 3.2% of the GDP, which is one of the highest in the world. So which is close to being one of the highest. China spends much less than this. US spends a little more. But the fact is that we are already spending a lot of money on higher education. Of course, there are issues of how the money is distributed, whether they are getting value for money or not. So there are different issues. So obviously, when we are spending a lot of national value on higher education, the whole issue of accountability becomes important. And this is one part of it. Second is, demand supply situation. In many subject areas, it has changed now. There is oversupply. And when there is a situation of oversupply, students and parents have choice. And again, the whole issue of rankings, benchmarking, public information on what is being done in each of these institutions becomes important. Third is the changing nature of higher education itself, and which is playing out slowly, but we are not very sure how it will play out for a long time. But I think the nature of higher education is changing. It's no more, the 3 core purposes or 2 core purposes of higher education about knowledge creation and knowledge delivery. They are getting transformed. The knowledge creation is no more happening in human brains alone. The humanity's brain, the internet, is enabling new knowledge to be created at a much faster pace. And the nature of knowledge that is being created is not very breakthrough discoveries and inventions. They're basically incremental, marginal improvements in processes and architects that are giving value, particularly for society, for the world, which is still not the developed world. So I think the nature of innovation, nature of new knowledge creation is changing, and it is changing the nature of higher education itself. Knowledge delivery, content delivery is no more the purpose of higher education. I think content is available. Developing understanding, engaging the students, inspiring them is becoming important. So these paradigm changes in higher education, how they will play out over the next few years or decades are yet to be known. But I am sure that this provides our country an advantage over the others, because as far as ICT, these technologies are concerned, the ecosystem that we have in India is as good as the rest of the world. I think we need not be behind the rest of the world in harnessing the potential of new technologies and new paradigm in learning and teaching to be front runners in higher education. So these were some basic remarks on the changes that I see in the higher education space. Coming to the issue of assessment, accreditation, rankings, I think this is being interchangeably used in India, and though I have colleagues, Professor Ranganath, who was associated with that for a very long time, and Paliwal, who is now handling the program accreditation through NBA, they are both here. But a little bit of rethinking is required in the way we look at accreditation and assessment, and I'll briefly mention about the three major stakeholders. I'm using the words interchangeably, rankings, accreditation, assessment, because sometimes, at least in India, we use them that way. One is, main stakeholders are parents and students in terms of public information to ensure that they make the right choices. And though we have these accreditation systems in place, but as far as this is concerned, we have not been able to use it effectively, or not at all, if I can say so. I've not heard of very many people not to know, accreditation status of an institution or a program before they get their children admitted in an institution. I may be wrong, but this is my sense. I think this role of assessment, accreditation, rankings, I think that way people tend to use India Today and these kind of rankings, which lack vigor and which have not problems. So, second is government and regulators. Government and regulators, again, to some extent, we are beginning to use them, but not really very effectively. I think this whole issue of making accreditation compulsory, how it will play out over a period of time is really not known. The global experience is making this mandatory like this does not really help. I think government can at best ensure compliance to accreditation by creating incentives, and in many countries they use public funding as an incentive, access to public funds as an incentive for accreditation. And my own sense is, though in our enthusiasm we are saying that accreditation is compulsory, but the way it will play out over the next 5, 6, 7 years is that we might, and we have the right to do so, the government has the right to do so, we might make accreditation, mandatory for access to public funds. So this is the way I look at things playing over the next few years. Third is, and I think the most important is, for the institutions themselves. Here the picture is somewhat mixed. I do hear that institutions value accreditation reports and they use it for self-improvement. I think globally, much of what is known as accreditation in the US system and elsewhere, it is more about self-improvement. Here, I think it is a mixed bag. There are a lot of scope for using accreditation effectively for self-improvement of processes and practices within the institutions, so that this can be useful. So I think with these remarks, maybe I'll mention one or two small things. Capacity is a big issue, and I was doing some numbers and I spoke in another forum that confusion in the Indian policy making. I think we feel that we can create multiple accreditation bodies and handle this issue of scale. These are issues which are yet to play out. But I think the point that I want to make is that we need to definitely adopt a very innovative approach to deliver on the promise of compulsory or 100% accreditation of our institutions. The current thinking will not lead us very far. I think instead of 50 years, we may reduce it to 20, 25 years, but it will not lead us very far. I think we already have in some way a two-tier structure, where universities and colleges affiliated to universities are there. So those affiliated universities playing some role in accreditation processes is the way forward to me. And perhaps the scale issue can be addressed by giving them a little more important role in the whole development in the ecosystem of accreditation. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, we will